What advice would you give to someone moving to Bermuda?
Welcome. And enjoy the best life ever.
Be prepared for 21 questions from everyone.
Wear sunscreen. Avoid the triangle.
Yo, COVID is still popping right now. All this time, man. It's October. Still going. So, remember to be responsible. Wear your mask, people. Wear your mask. Are you one of those people that are considering a job offer that requires you to relocate to Bermuda? Or are you considering applying for the new residential certificate that allows one to live in Bermuda while working remotely? If either of these scenarios apply to you, then you probably have a lot of questions, because I'm guessing you've never actually heard much about Bermuda before all of this, outside of the triangle. So I'm sure you have plenty of questions. And in this video, I'll do my best to provide some answers with 6 things to know before moving to Bermuda. First of all, my name's Omar, if you couldn't tell already. I was born and raised in Bermuda, and it's my admittedly biased opinion that Bermuda is the most beautiful country in the world. I've lived all over this rock, from the west side to the east side and all points in between. So hopefully I can give you some useful information and insight into this island. And there are around 60,000 of us here that call Bermuda home. We're Bermudians, not Bermudians. Remember that too. Now, let's start with the basics. Bermuda's a tiny group of islands about 900 miles east of North Carolina. And no, we're not physically located in the Caribbean region, although we often associate ourselves with other countries in that area. This leads to my first major piece of advice. Bring winter clothing. We don't have summer weather year-round like they do in other Caribbean countries. So if you're planning to be here through the winter months, which is typically January through May, bring the appropriate clothing. You don't need a snow jacket or anything heavy like that, but plan for temperatures that can drop into the 50s Fahrenheit with lots of wind and rain. It's not a freezing Canadian winter, but it can get pretty miserable sometimes. The perfect piece of gear, and what I'll recommend you invest in, is a sailing jacket. That's what you'll search for from a company like Helly Hansen. Or you can support a local Bermudian business and check out the Jamie Madison collection on Facebook. Those jackets are just as good, and they have that Bermudian flair to them. If you want something cheap, then you're going to want to buy your gear before you get here, because on-island prices are high. And that leads me to my next piece of advice. Plan ahead, because Bermuda is expensive. I'm sure you've already heard some variation of this statement, and it's true, but not in the ways you expect. Like, I see people, they try to draw comparisons between Bermuda and places like New York, and they'll say, oh, the average cost to rent an apartment is about the same, so if I can afford to live in New York, I can afford to live in Bermuda. But the problem with these types of comparisons is that they totally ignore the reasons behind our high cost of living. It's a complex, hot button issue, and I'm not going to spend too much time on it here, maybe in a separate video. Just remember that we're a small island in the middle of nowhere, so pretty much everything needs to be imported. And with importation comes import fees and taxes and everything like that, and all of that goes hand in hand to increase the cost of everything on the island. So my advice is to plan ahead. If there's any online shopping or specialty items you need to get before you get here, do it before you get here. Like, don't wait till you get here and then try to lend it, because getting things landed on the island can be a huge task sometimes. And while we're on the topic of the cost of living, my other piece of advice in this category would be to know what type of life you can afford and be realistic about it. What do I mean by this? I mean, if you plan to have a very comfortable time here, or at least live the type of life that resembles all those Bermuda tourism commercials that you see on TV or whatever, then you need to be bringing home a significant amount of money. I'd say at least $100,000 a year. And depending on your family situation and, you know, your expectations, you may need significantly more than that. If you want to live in a nice house that's centrally located, that's going to cost money. You want to eat fresh fruit and vegetables every day because you don't like the furs and stuff, that's going to be a lot of money. You want to drive a car? That's going to be a lot of money. Which brings us to the next tip. Choose your mode of transportation. I'll make this simple. Cars are the most comfortable option, most comfortable way to get around, but they're expensive. And things like parking can be problematic because our roads are small and there's relatively few dedicated parking areas in Bermuda. So you better be great at reversing and parallel parking.
Yeah, where you going? Where you going? Rasclat! Oh my lord. Yep.
You also need an assessment number to license a car. And these are registered one per housing unit, so they can be difficult to come by. Check with your landlord to see if the place you're renting has an assessment number available, because these usually get sold or given to their relatives or whatever. So if you plan to buy a car, get the status of the assessment number before you move in. Electric mini cars are also an option, but you can only rent them, which can also get expensive. Mopeds are easier to get around in, but they leave you exposed to the elements, and they can be dangerous if you're not a confident rider. But on the plus side, you can rent one for about $600 a month, or you can buy one brand new for less than $3,000. So for a long stay, it's the cheapest option. Of course, we also have taxes and public transportation, but I would describe these as viable but unreliable. For example, you try to use either of these options after midnight, and the experience can range from frustrating to impossible. And we don't have any ride-sharing apps. Like, I know we have Hitch, but that's masquerading as one too. Don't be fooled. It's just a taxi service. So my advice for using either of these, public trans or taxis, is, again, plan ahead. Find a bus route that you'll be taking and make sure you know how often it runs and on what days, because weekends and holidays, the schedule is completely different sometimes. And if you find a taxi driver that you like, that you get along with, get his card. Put his number on speed dial. Most taxi drivers will appreciate the steady work. And then on the plus side, you don't have to rely on the spotty dispatch service. But at the end of the day, there's no rush, because island time is real. Learn to relax and roll with it. Look, people are going to show up late to meetings, if they come at all. Businesses and stores, they're going to close early. Sometimes you can't reach that government department because everyone's been out on lunch for 2 hours. Get used to it, because that's island life, baby. This is it. But don't get annoyed, don't get frustrated, just relax. Turn off your computer, finish your work early, go to the beach, chill. Because island time is like the current in the ocean. If you swim against it, you're just gonna tire yourself out. So lay back, chill, go with the flow. Get yourself an alcoholic beverage and enjoy the ride. But remember one thing when you're drinking in Bermuda. Drinking is a national pastime. Don't get caught up.
And we drink, Bermudians love to drink. On the occasion, each of us waging, Bermudians love to drink. And we drink, Bermudians love to drink. Any occasion, each of us waging, Bermudians love to drink.
A good friend of mine who moved here from Canada, she once described her time in Bermuda as a giant college party for adults. On one side, you have the local Bermudians that are born with a cup of swizzle in their hand. And on the other side, there's a small army of expats and tourists, most of which are new to the island. You add into that mix a bunch of parties and boats and beaches that are never more than a few minutes away, and you have a party environment that's easy to get sucked into. I've seen people move here, get caught up, and in a year or two, they're leaving with a broken relationship and an alcohol problem. You have to find productive outlets to balance things out. Join a gym, a book club. Listen, I'll be real. There's not a whole lot of social activities on this island that don't involve drinking. And that's part of the problem. But if you get here and you look beyond the bars and the party scene, you'll be surprised what you could find. And while we're looking, just don't forget to be polite and say hello to people. Look, the unfortunate truth that a lot of people don't like talking about is that sometimes there's a clear and deliberate separation between the local and the expat community. But don't fall into that trap. Bermudians are some of the friendliest people on earth, so don't be afraid to introduce yourself. Don't just stick to the expat crowds or the people that you work with. Introduce yourself, meet new people. But please remember, you gotta be polite and lead off your conversations with a good morning or a good evening. And listen, I lived in Philly for like 3 years, right? I know it's strange and it seems like a small, inconsequential thing, but in Bermuda, it's a serious thing. The fastest way to get on a Bermudian's bedside is to start talking without the expected pleasantries. Like, we're old school like that. Not doing that in Bermuda is considered very rude. And you're going to see the same people over and over, day in, day out. Same people walking on the street, at the store, same people. So when you're in Rome, do as the Romans do and throw out those good mornings like confetti. You do that, and when cop match comes around, you'll be getting plenty of invitations to the campsites and the barbecues. Trust me. So, yep. Mask back on, man. Those were 6 quick tips for people considering a long-term move to the island. Hopefully, it was useful to you. If it was, go down below, hit that like button. If you have any questions or you want me to cover something in particular, jump down in the comment section and leave a message. And if enough people ask, maybe I'll do a part 2. And if you're on the island and you need a drinking partner, hit me up, man. I love meeting new people. Also, consider subscribing to the channel and joining my little community as I cover all things Bermuda. And also, big thanks to everyone that contributed their commentary on social media. You can always find me on Facebook, Instagram, everything. I'm under Omar the Juice. Big thanks for that. Safe travels. Remember to mask up, wash your hands, and I'll see you in the next video.